Every single day of your life, you are sending a message, not with words, not with speeches, not with any grand declaration of who you are or what you deserve, with something far more powerful and far more honest than anything you could ever say: your behavior. The quiet, daily, unconscious pattern of how you carry yourself, how you respond, how you allow yourself to be treated, and how you treat yourself when no one is watching. The people around you are receiving this message every single day, learning from it, adjusting how they treat you based entirely on what it teaches. 7 behaviors, 7 quiet things that permanently change what people believe about your worth. Stay until the very end, because behavior number 5 will change how you see every relationship in your life forever. There is a truth about human worth that almost no one teaches you. Not in school, not in any conversation you are likely to have growing up. It is a truth so fundamental, so immediately applicable to every area of your life, that its absence from standard human education is almost incomprehensible. Your worth is not determined by what you say about yourself. It is not established through arguments or declarations or the careful management of what people think of you. It is established through behavior, through the quiet, consistent, daily pattern of how you carry yourself in the most ordinary moments of your life. Marcus Aurelius understood this with a depth and clarity that 2,000 years have not diminished. He wrote in his private journal, words never meant for other eyes, that the quality of a person is revealed not in their great moments, but in their small ones. Not in how they behave when everyone is watching, but in how they behave when no one is. Not in the speeches they make about who they are, but in the 10,000 tiny decisions they make every single day about how they will allow themselves to be treated and how they will treat themselves. Epictetus said simply, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Not say, do. 7 behaviors, 7 quiet practices that the most genuinely respected people in history embodied, not as strategies, not as performances, as the natural expression of people who had decided at the deepest level exactly what they were worth, and chose to demonstrate it every day in the smallest moments, where all real decisions are actually made. The first behavior is the one that makes all the others possible, and it is the one that most people most consistently violate, not out of weakness, but out of a fundamental misunderstanding of what self-respect actually is. Most people understand self-respect as something that happens between themselves and others, the refusal to be treated badly, the ability to stand up when someone crosses a line. But this understanding rests on a foundation that most people never build: the ability to keep your word to yourself, the private promises, the quiet commitments you make when no one else is present to hold you accountable, the decision made at midnight about how tomorrow will go, the boundary you decide in the silence of your own mind that you will finally hold. Here is what Epictetus understood, and what modern psychology has confirmed again and again. The way you treat your own word in private becomes the template for everything else. When you consistently break the promises you make to yourself, when you let yourself down again and again in the small things, you are not just developing a habit of inconsistency. You are training your nervous system to believe that your word does not fully mean what it says, and that belief does not stay contained to your relationship with yourself. It radiates outward, into every relationship you have, into every interaction where someone is deciding whether you can be trusted. People feel this, not in some mystical way, in the most ordinary way possible. They watch what you do. They notice the distance between your words and your actions, and they calibrate their treatment of you accordingly. Begin keeping your word to yourself with the same seriousness you would bring to a promise made to someone you deeply respect. The workout you said you would do, the conversation you said you would have, the boundary you said you would hold. Follow through, not because anyone is watching, because you are watching. And every time you do, you add one more piece of evidence to a case that is being built inside you and around you. The case that says, this person means what they say. This person can be trusted, starting with themselves. The second behavior changes every conversation you will ever have. Notice what happens the next time you say no to something. Count the sentences that follow. Most people do not stop at one. They give a reason, then a backup reason, then a small apology wrapped around both, then a reassurance that they are not a bad person for declining. By the end, the no is buried so deep under qualifications that it barely exists anymore. Over-explaining is one of the most common ways people quietly signal that they do not fully trust their own decisions. It is a bid for approval disguised as information, and the people on the receiving end, consciously or not, pick up on exactly that. When you over-explain, you are communicating something you never intended to communicate. You are saying that your answer requires their acceptance in order to feel valid. You are handing them a small but significant amount of power over your choices. And over time, they start to expect that power. They start to require the explanation before they will accept the answer. Silence, brevity, the clean edge of a complete sentence. These carry authority. They communicate that your decision was made with confidence and does not require a defense. I will not be able to make it, but I hope it goes well. That sentence is complete. It is kind. It is enough. The absence of 12 follow-up sentences is not rudeness. It is self-assurance wearing quiet clothes. Start noticing where you over-explain. you will find it is usually in the places where you do not yet fully trust yourself to be enough without justification. That is the real work, not crafting better explanations, needing fewer of them. Because when you trust your own answer, the explanation becomes optional, and the people around you will trust it too. The third behavior is the one that most people find almost physically uncomfortable to practice, because it requires them to do the one thing that every instinct they have is telling them not to do: nothing. Most people are terrified of an unresolved moment. Silence falls in a conversation and they immediately fill it. Someone seems upset and they rush to smooth it over. There is friction and they sprint toward resolution. Not because the moment has actually been resolved, but because the discomfort of waiting, the raw, uncomfortable feeling of a moment that has not yet been made okay, feels completely unbearable. So they patch things. They apologize when they are not wrong. They soften truths that needed to land. They chase the feeling of okayness instead of waiting for the reality of it. And in doing so, they teach the people around them something enormously important. Tension will always be relieved, and quickly, regardless of who caused it. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the discipline of not acting from anxiety, of responding to what actually requires a response, not simply to what feels urgent. Discomfort almost always falls into the second category. It feels urgent. It rarely is. When you stop reflexively soothing every tense moment, something shifts in your relationships. People learn that the dynamic between you will not always bend in their direction simply because the air got heavy. They learn that your calm is real, not a performance, not a fragility waiting to be exposed. They learn that you can hold hard moments without dissolving. And the people who notice that, and they will notice, treat you accordingly. The fourth behavior is one that almost everyone mistakes for modesty, and it is the one that quietly communicates more about how you see yourself than almost anything else you do. Someone tells you that you did something well, and before they have finished the sentence, you are already deflecting. "Oh, it was nothing. Anyone could have done it. I actually almost made a complete mess of the whole thing." You laugh a little. You redirect. You make yourself smaller than the moment they were trying to give you. It feels like humility. It is not. At least it is rarely just humility. More often, deflecting a compliment is a subtle rejection of the person offering it, as if their positive experience of your work or your presence is somehow mistaken. And underneath that, there is something quieter and harder to look at directly. A belief that receiving good things graciously is dangerous, that agreeing with someone who sees your worth is arrogant. Here's what no one tells you. The way you receive a compliment tells people precisely how you see yourself, and how you see yourself they come to mirror. If you consistently dismiss their positive assessments, they begin slowly and subtly to question those assessments too. Receiving well is a skill. It is not about basking or performing gratitude. It is about learning to simply let it land. "Thank you. That means a great deal to me. Full stop. No hedge, no immediate self-deprecation, no pivot to something else, just a clean, open receipt. The 2 seconds where you allow yourself to be seen as capable, worthy, good, without flinching away from it. When you receive this way, you are reinforcing something true, that you are someone who belongs in the good moments, not just the apologetic ones. The 5th behavior, the one I promised you, is the one that will permanently change how you see every relationship in your life. You stop shrinking in rooms. You know what shrinking looks like. You have done it. So has almost everyone. It is sitting at the edge of a table instead of pulling your chair in fully. It is lowering your voice mid-sentence because you suddenly were not sure your thought was worth the full volume. It is preemptively apologizing for taking up space before anyone has suggested you should not. It is making yourself smaller, physically, verbally, energetically, as a kind of social insurance policy. A way of saying before anyone else can, I will not take more than I am given. The problem is that people tend to give you exactly as much as you claim. Body language is a language, and like any language, it communicates whether you intend it to or not. When you walk into a room like you are not sure you belong there, the room tends to agree. Not out of cruelty, out of taking your cue. You have told them through every contracted muscle and apologetic gesture what to believe about your presence. And they believe you. Seneca wrote about the importance of simply being, of not constantly performing yourself for others' approval. There is something deeply freeing in that. To stop negotiating your right to occupy space. To arrive and simply allow yourself to be there. The room does not need your apology for being in it. The conversation does not need you to preemptively make yourself smaller. Walk in, sit down, speak at your actual volume. Let your presence be what it is, without editing it downward. The space you have been given was always meant for you.
The 6th behavior is the one that requires the particular kind of courage that has nothing to do with confrontation or aggression. The courage to end things that have already ended. Some things are over long before we let them go. The friendship that runs entirely on obligation and old memory. The role you have outgrown but keep showing up to perform. The relationship that drained to empty somewhere in the middle distance, and yet here you still are, maintaining it, performing it, treating the ghost of it like it owes you something for your continued patience. Holding on to things that have already ended is not loyalty. It is a quiet form of self-abandonment, and it teaches the people in your life something they should never learn. That your presence is not something to be cherished, but something to be assumed. That you will stay past the point of reason, past the point where any honest examination of the situation would have told you to leave. There is a particular kind of courage in ending things cleanly, not dramatically, not with speeches or fire, quietly. A conversation that simply gets shorter, a presence that gradually withdraws, an internal decision made without announcement. This is no longer mine to carry. When you begin releasing what no longer serves you, actually releasing it, not just thinking about releasing it, you communicate something essential about your own value. You demonstrate that your time, your energy, your emotional presence are not infinite, freely available resources. They are finite, they are precious, and they go where they are genuinely received. The people who remain when you have made that kind of edit, who stay in the spaces you have kept, meet a version of you that has infinitely more to give, because you have stopped bleeding energy into everything that had already ended. The seventh and final behavior is the one that ties everything together, and it is the one that, practiced consistently, makes you more psychologically powerful than almost anyone in any room you enter. You respond. You do not react. Someone says something that gets under your skin. Your pulse lifts. Your thoughts sharpen. Every part of you wants to answer immediately. The sixth behavior is the one that requires the particular kind of courage that has nothing to do with confrontation or aggression. The courage to end things that have already ended. Some things are over long before we let them go. The friendship that runs entirely on obligation and old memory. The role you have outgrown but keep showing up to perform. The relationship that drained to empty somewhere in the middle distance, and yet here you still are, maintaining it, performing it, treating the ghost of it like it owes you something for your continued patience. Holding on to things that have already ended is not loyalty. It is a quiet form of self-abandonment, and it teaches the people in your life something they should never learn, that your presence is not something to be cherished, but something to be assumed, that you will stay past the point of reason, past the point where any honest examination of the situation would have told you to leave. There is a particular kind of courage in ending things cleanly, not dramatically, not with speeches or fire, quietly, a conversation that simply gets shorter, a presence that gradually withdraws, an internal decision made without announcement. This is no longer mine to carry. When you begin releasing what no longer serves you, actually releasing it, not just thinking about releasing it, you communicate something essential about your own value. You demonstrate that your time, your energy, your emotional presence are not infinite, freely available resources. They are finite, they are precious, and they go where they are genuinely received. The people who remain when you have made that kind of edit, who stay in the spaces you have kept, meet a version of you that has infinitely more to give, because you have stopped bleeding energy into everything that had already ended.
The seventh and final behavior is the one that ties everything together. And it is the one that, practiced consistently, makes you more psychologically powerful than almost anyone in any room you enter. You respond, you do not react. Someone says something that gets under your skin. Your pulse lifts, your thoughts sharpen. Every part of you wants to answer immediately.
To defend. Correct. Let them know exactly what you think of what they just said. That impulse is human. It is almost universal. And acting on it every single time is one of the quietest and most consistent ways you hand your power to someone else. Reacting is automatic. It says whatever just happened has complete control over me right now. Responding is deliberate. It says, I heard you, and I will engage with you on my own terms. The difference in the moment might look like only a breath, a single pause, 1 second where you choose not to immediately fill the air. But that pause is doing something profound. It is the space where your considered self gets a chance to arrive before your reactive self makes decisions it will later regret. Epictetus built nearly his entire philosophical framework around this gap between what happens and what you choose to do about it. In that space lives your freedom, your power, your character. The people who trust you most, the ones who give you their respect, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it, are the ones who have noticed that you cannot be easily moved, that you do not bend with every gust of wind, that your response comes from somewhere steady, from somewhere real. And steadiness like that cannot be performed, it can only be built. One pause at a time, one deliberate breath at a time. One moment of choosing response over reaction at a time, until it becomes the quiet truth of who you are. 7 behaviors, none of them dramatic, none of them requiring a reinvention of who you are. That is what makes this both harder and more hopeful than it first appears. There is no single turning point, no grand gesture, no morning you wake up and decide to be different and immediately become it. The change is quieter than that, and slower, and once it begins, more permanent than anything dramatic could ever be. Because this is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming more precisely yourself, the version of you that keeps its own word, that speaks without excessive apology, that can sit in discomfort without collapsing, that receives good things graciously, that takes up the space it is owed, that releases what is finished, and that chooses response over reaction every single day, in the smallest moments, where worth is not declared, where worth is built. You have been teaching people your worth all along. The only question that has ever mattered is, what do you want them to learn? If this video shifted something in you today, something quiet and real and genuinely yours, subscribe to Dark Stoic, because every single week we go exactly this deep into the psychology that most people never encounter, into the ancient truths that the Stoics spent their lives trying to teach, and that most of the modern world has completely forgotten. This is only the beginning. Subscribe and begin teaching the world exactly what you are worth.